Chase, do the intro. Go.
What's up, guys? It's a nice and bright Tuesday afternoon here in beautiful OKC. I am Chase Lindley. With me is Alex Koseri.
Chase Lindley, of what organization are you with? Possibly you would have a shirt that would let us know.
I'm with Starting Strength Oklahoma City.
How's that been going?
Coach. It's doing good, man. We're slowly getting more people. It's such a weird demographic compared to like what I had in Houston. Like I have a lot more kids. So I'm kind of getting back in my roots, so to speak. And then a lot more women too, which is good. I'm glad to see we actually have like a Pilates studio that's pretty close to us. So I think we're kind of influencing them.
Nice.
Hopefully, yeah, we're stealing more people from them. But yeah, it's good to see, moms come in, and I have one lady in the evenings who's like, yeah, my son weighs like 40 something pounds. It's like, that's not that heavy, but
yeah,
she's starting to now get to the point where like she can reach over, pick him up in awkward positions. She's not struggling. So it's really good.
Yeah, all the little life stuff that we forget. And this episode is going to be entirely unrelated to that because we're talking about competitions. So unfortunately, there are no child lifting or throwing competitions. There are for a lot of other cool sports. So we're going to talk more about that. But you said you had a lot of kids. Are you having a lot of like parent-kid combos? Like it's not just the kids. It's not like just like a 16-year-old come by themselves. It's always like mom or dad lifts and then the kids there too.
Yeah. I think I have about 2, I guess, duos you can say.
Mm-hmm.
One in the morning and one in the evening.
Nice. Cool, is it weird? Do the kids ever like go to the parent for more confirmation whenever you're saying things?
Like it's kind of weird because it's they have that either the majority of them it's their father comes in, so they have the father figure role of like, look, I'm supposed to listen to him even though I know what I'm talking about and the dad's already pointed this out, but like I have a kid who's really hyperactive. I'll kind of yell at him like, hey, I'll snap at him and let's get this shit going. And he kind of just looks at his dad and then looks back. I'm like, yeah, well,
don't look at him, look at me.
Yeah. And his dad's just over there, just resting after his heavy ass set. So he doesn't care, right? He's in his own little element.
Yeah.
And I have full control of you now.
Nice. You should try swearing at them aggressively. I'm sure that'll go over great.
I know. Just call them every name in the book.
Yeah. But yeah, that's our boy Chase Lindley. Chase does online. You can find him here with his Instagram, Chase Lindley, and then Chase_Lindley. It's one of the two. I do online coaching as well. I am on that website. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it. Hopefully you can try and figure that out for yourself. And then if you want to get videos on the show, that is going to be through support@strength.club. So if you have any questions about the Starting Strength app, the Strength Club app, any of that stuff, that can all go there. Either Mick or I will respond to that. Basically what we do here is we try to kind of tease out a little bit more of Starting Strength's content, so for those of us who haven't taken the time to read the textbooks, and I will call them textbooks rather than just normal books, a lot of these things can be a little bit confusing, so it's better to talk through them. That's what we're doing this time. Of course, it's the competition episode. We're going to talk about like why you would decide to compete as an athlete. What would you end up competing in once you're going through your novice and intermediate stages? Kind of like what's the value of it? And we're talking about Chase's competition, and we're going to do a bunch of form checks today. We have a bunch of good ones lined up. So we'll just get right into the meat and potatoes of it. Chase, you've competed a good bit. Let me know what sports have you competed in your lifetime?
Been various athletes in basketball, baseball. Football. I went to college, and that was kind of my main sport in high school. Went to college for a little bit with football, powerlifting, and then now I'm doing my first Olympic weightlifting meet.
Nice. Okay, so basically, what was the first one you think you took seriously? Do you take them all seriously?
Football? Yeah, probably football. And It was kind of weird growing up. It was like it kind of had like this weird mental shift of during this season it's football, right? I'm not really concerned about trying to get stronger. I'm more so worried about preventing injury, right? Whereas like on the off season, it's like, yeah, let's fucking push this. Let's just go balls to the walls. Let's try to enter a meet or get really damn strong and kind of do my own little prep like I was going into a meet.
Right, yeah, even if there's not a real competition, just prep for it on your own. We got G Lock in the chat. He said, hi, friends. Hello. Chat's lonely today. If you're in the chat, you can sound off and say hi to Mr. Glock there. I've competed in a good bit of things. I've competed. I really didn't start any athletics until I was 18. Mostly, I've competed in the grappling sports, so in judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But I've also competed. We were talking about this before the show. Hopefully, we can get some footage from Mick. But I've competed in both ping pong and ultimate frisbee before. which are two incredibly dangerous sports, much more dangerous than all the grappling. But yeah, so this is going to be an interesting perspective. I think Chase and I are going to probably have a good bit of different answers here about, like why competing, utility for it, all that sort of stuff. But one of the things that Mark Ripito talks about in the Gray book, and I think maybe in the end of the Blue book, Starting Strength as well, is like having a sport interest as an intermediate, having a lot of utility, right? Chase, do you want to sound off about that? Do you want to let us know what's going on there? If you don't remember, I can.
Basically, it just boils down to one point, right? You become strong from the novice linear progression, right? Everyone knows that strength is the most general adaptation. Now it's time to use that strength for whatever sport interests you. Now, you can't just go cold turkey with, not doing, strengthlifting. You have to maintain it or slightly improve it as you're doing your sport. And this is where this is starting to come in with intermediate style training, and you have now stuck to something and you're training for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget about the time, like the time aspect. You should be physically active your entire life. So let's say even if you start this thing at 40 years old, right? So you are close to being over the hill. You should, let's say you're physically active until the average male lifespan and you're 73 and a half and you drop dead exactly as soon as you hit that average total. You still have like 30 some years of change to be physically active for. What the hell are you going to be doing the entire time? So when people get super caught up with like 5 pounds for every lift every session for the first 3.5 months of their career, they don't realize that it's like you should be active and doing shit and having fun with it for decades. So having sport interest, varied sport interest, it's a really powerful tool to have. Since you're already familiar with the barbell, one of the most immediate ones that people transition to is going to be powerlifting or weightlifting if they've been, being a good boy and they've been doing the power cleans. So for a lot of people, they'll find Starting Strength through a sport interest. So they'll be like, oh, I'm a marathon runner, and I've been having a lot of shin splints. I want to get my bones a little more dense. I'm having knee pain. I want to fix my knee pain. Like for myself, I ended up fighting Starting Strength through just being like a relatively weak grappler for my weight class. I needed to move up a weight class. I needed to figure out how. I needed to figure out to put on some muscle. You find these things. So having a sport interest is super helpful. Chase, for you see a lot of people who end up transitioning to powerlifting and weightlifting.
Yeah, more so powerlifting.
Weightlifting is still very niche.
It is. It just kind of follows suit in the sense that, look, we've been training the squat, we've been training the deadlift and the press. Now it's time to go have fun with it. And it's kind of like a more seamless transition. It's not, for me, example, like I'm transitioning and trying to learn weightlifting. It's spending more time now practicing that movement, getting to where I'm comfortable with the movements and just kind of getting that physiological adaptation. Whereas if you're already going into powerlifting or strengthlifting, you're really more suited for it. Now we just kind of have to program and tweak those variables that we were talking about in the last podcast, getting into the meat.
Yeah. So we'll go over the programming considerations a little bit later on. Between different types of competition, so like let's say that if you're doing football, you'll have a lot of internal expectations to fulfill your position's roles, and then your team's expectations for what you should be doing. But for a lot of people, team sports are kind of out the window after a certain age. It's not really something that you can pick up super easily, unless it's something like recreational softball, like a softball league or something like that. But for like more serious sports, it's almost always going to be individual after a certain age. So like martial arts are a really good example. So judo, BJJ, boxing, all that stuff, individual. Powerlifting, weightlifting, also individual. It's different because if you do a powerlifting meet or a weightlifting meet, you're just there trying to beat yourself. You will never be competitive in your first meet, maybe your first 5 meets, Whereas for another sport where it's one person versus one person, let's say racquetball, tennis, ping pong, something like that, it's you versus another person. So one of the really cool things about deciding, I'm going to do a powerlifting competition or weightlifting meet is that it's just you. You're just trying to beat your own highest score that you've been working with. You've been working on this craft for, let's say, the past year or the past 2 years, what you need to do. And then we'll talk more about kind of planning your year eventually, like using competition as a tool to kind of structure your life, because again, you have so much time to train. It should be kind of imperative to figure out something fun to do with it. I wanted to look at this guy again real quick. We've seen this image before, and then use this as kind of a jumping off point. We got Skankstro in the chat, and then we got Mr. Dr. Sir. Chase, can you read that question?
Yeah, so Skankstro. Hey, I got a question. I'm in the military. Whenever I travel, I can't bring a whole gym. Usually I can bring a couple kettlebells. Are kettlebells smart in this setting? Again, you got to do the best with what you got. it depends on, where you're getting deployed at. Because I know some areas they do have somewhat of like a janky setup, some with barbells, but yeah, you just got to, again, like I said, do the best with what you can with kettlebells. You're mainly just maintaining your strength or trying the best to maintain your strength. Don't look to train because you haven't been training previously with kettlebells. So don't expect to now get a different training adaptation where it's going to provide you to get stronger.
Yeah. So like if you're looking for it to like, let's say if you leave your squat off at 315 and then you do kettlebell work for a month block, you don't expect to be back at 315 when you do that. Your kettlebell stuff will have increased in whatever you've been doing it with, but not your barbell sport stuff. Yeah, kettlebells are always a really good idea. How do you maintain with them? You are just looking to stimulate all of your muscle groups as relatively frequently as you can with whatever relative intensity you can pull off, right? So the biggest movements you're going to be able to do are like weighted dips, weighted pull-ups, weighted push-ups, weighted pistol squats, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it's basically you're trying to still use the same exercise criteria that we use basically for everything else, which is muscle mass, range of motion, and whatever weight you can use. That's kind of throttled for you because you can't bring a million kettlebells with you. But if you get your weighted pull-up to, let's say you have a 25-pound kettlebell and a 30-pound kettlebell, you can get your weighted pull-up up to 55 for a set of 8. That's still great. Yeah, you can get fun with programming there for it. But yeah, so back to this guy. The reason why this chart is relevant into the competition thing, I know we saw this last episode if you were watching that guy. So basically, we'll see that strength performance, all of these things are relatively asymptotic, just depending on which direction you're going in. But strength performance does cap out after a certain point. Everyone approaches their individual genetic potential eventually. You're going to get through this first, let's say, year of training, and you're going to say really, really fast strength gains. And then for most people, if you look at the slope of this curve, that's enough to be interesting on their own. They'll be like, man, I can put 70 pounds of my deadlift in 24 weeks or something like that, or I can put 150 pounds of my squat across the calendar year. That's this honeymoon period, and then you get to there, and then now you're fighting for this relatively much smaller sliver of your strength performance of your line. And then with that, you have to say, how am I supposed to stay interested during this, right? Because your rate of adaptation slows down, the demand and complexity of the training goes up, and you're getting less of a reward for it. It kind of seems like a raw deal. So the things that you kind of have to do, that's why you have to keep it interesting, So the reason competition, it's really nice to kind of occupy all of this time is so that you can make fighting for these like little tooth and nail gains worth it. Chase, whenever your pull gets really heavy, so whenever you're working your 700-pound pull, what was like rate of progress and expectations for you like?
Mainly it's just planning ahead, right?
I mean, like, let's say, were you aiming for a PR once a month?
Gotcha.
Were you hitting a heavy set every, week, something like that?
Relatively, yeah, heavy set. So I'm manipulating, like a set of 5, maybe a triple, and then a single. I'm kind of titrating down, in accordance to maybe a few weeks out of that heavy single. Maybe I'm really upping the force production event with doing a heavy set of 5.
So how often are you expecting to set a PR at your stage of development? Because you are quite the advanced athlete.
If I were to pick my meets throughout the year, maybe like a 3-month period, I could probably maybe put on 5 pounds at that point to all lift.
Right. And then exactly. So if you think about that, so let's say 5 pounds across, a 2 or 3 lift meet. Okay. So he's adding around 5 kilos, right, per meet to his total. Let's say he does that really realistically 2 times a year. It's 10 kilos on each lift or for the total for the year. That's really not that much. When you just start out, you can add 10 kilos in a week, So like, why would Chase continue to do this despite having to work so hard and move so many reps and do so much stuff, just for that really tiny gain? It's kind of for a love of competition, the love of the sport, embracing the process, all that sort of stuff. So Chase, why do you still chase competition? I hate to say chase 2 times in a sentence, but you know what I mean.
It's all good, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you hinted on it, man. It's just the mental thing. Like growing up, I've always been competitive, whether it be, the sport of soccer, baseball, basketball, football. Now, again, as you mentioned, those sports are highly team-based, right? And then as you get further into those, it's more so you have to be the best of the best in terms of genetic potential. Like you're a freak athlete. I was pretty good, right? But I'm not going to be playing on Sunday at the NFL. So I got to do something that's more individual, something that I have more control instead of my genetics or external factors having control of. And that's where, weightlifting and powerlifting kind of made sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good productive outlet that you can funnel into for a very long time, because it's like, they take a long time to master. Tidor had an interesting question. He said, Mark mentions it's better to have, here we go, it's better to have fun, as in doing other sports after you've gotten strong. Wouldn't trying to get good at boxing, for example, impact your NLP and therefore ability to get strong? Yeah, if you're looking at it in a very discrete, short window of time, so like if you are splitting your physical resources or physical capital and interest, and then you're surprised that your results are also distributed, that would be a little bit weird, So it's like if I'm trying to get really good at like two different sports at the same time, like let's say if I'm trying to play piano and the flute. They're both music, it's both physical activity. They're not going to have one-to-one carryover with each other. Don't think about it like that. But so yeah, we definitely recommend for most people during the NLP to just focus on the task at hand, which is getting strong. Because again, like we talked about, even if you start this when you're 40, you still have, let's say, 32 and a half years to figure out what you're going to do with your time. So if you spend 6 months to build up a good base of fitness, you can, pull 3, you can squat 3 something, bench 2 something. You're stronger than most athletes that you're going to run into already in the recreational scene, right? Or let's say even intramural, the JV squad. And then after that, you have all of that other time to slowly refine both your ability to get strong and your sport. So yeah, good question, man.
Yeah, I
Huge
think,
question.
and also another way of thinking about this too is like we want the majority of people coming in to focus on the novice linear progression because it's hard to gain strength.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it may seem like that's counterintuitive to what we've been saying. At the start, it's easy, right? But then as you get later into it, it's hard to gain weight. It's hard for people to stay consistent with coming in. There's a bunch of other factors like that. Whereas boxing, you already have it, right? You have it down. You love it. Now you got to do something that's going to help your boxing and therefore may not seem as appealing to you as boxing. So that's why we want people just to kind of not necessarily hit boxing so hard with as it being a novice or just any sport in general. It's mainly focused on that strength period, right? And then once you have that layer of strength, maintain it and do your sport.
Yeah, Chase has a good point there. Just in terms of like mental resources, it's not just physical resources. Like if you really love boxing and you see strength training as a supplement to your boxing, when you hit those 3 sessions a week, you're going to sandbag it. And when it's the end of the LP and it's like, hey, I need you to do some really, really hard sets, that person's going to be like, oh, it's going to ruin my boxing practice, the following day or something like that. So once you're an intermediate athlete, you can juggle those things really effectively because you have a much better base of conditioning. But if you're literally going from, couch potato to I want to do activity 6 times a week, that's a little bit more of a complicated problem. So we'll run through these things pretty fast. We have a good bit of form checks to get through, so we'll try and finish up in the next 10 minutes or so. Chase, do you want to head us off with specificity? This is, of course, the most relevant thing to competition, is I need to be doing the thing, right?
Yep. So let's take for example, what's going to make me better at football, right? So football is a very forceful event. It's basically you smashing the fuck out of the other person, or just running really fast, jumping really high, being really athletic, right? So what are exercises that we can possibly use to help benefit us through those force production events, right? That's where the squats come in: press, bench, power clean, deadlift, all the lifts basically in starting strength. We use those specifically because, again, we can train those for a long period of time. They're incrementally loadable, meaning I can see the progress of how I'm getting stronger, and my force reduction event is getting better each time I'm coming in because, again, the number on the bar is getting higher. And then as you get closer into other sports, let's say it's swimming or table tennis or whatever it is, you got to have to kind of keep that thought in the back of your mind of what is this actually doing, right? So swimming is very submaximal, meaning like it's not one massive stroke that you have to perform. It's several thousand strokes, and essentially a marathon too. It's very submaximal, right? So we have to kind of train for that. And I'm not going to have the swimmer or the runner gain 50 pounds of muscle and then expect them to be better at their sport because that would put them in a bad time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So like recommendations as to how to like juice the most out of the LP are definitely not related, or even let's say they're not accurate to whatever your future demands are going to be. So like let's say if someone is doing a weight class sport, any sort of sport where you're trying to climb anything, or let's say if you have to move your body around, let's say if you're like a cross country skier who's doing a ton of distance work, or you are a rock climber, right? Both of those carrying an extra 25 pounds, it's a huge deal. Carrying an extra 5 pounds is probably okay. Losing some fat, putting on some muscle is good, but moving up 2 weight classes probably isn't. So you need to be more specific to whatever you're attempting to do in the future, even if that's not super accurate, right? So like if you think that you're going to end up doing, let's say, cross-country skiing or swimming or something like that, it's going to be a little bit different. But if you think you'll eventually be doing powerlifting, it's totally okay to gain, 50 pounds. So through the course of training, you want to get really specific to whatever your interests are over time, right? So like if we were to go back to that graph, for example, specificity would also follow a pretty similar curve. Eventually, you don't have to be super specific to start. Specificity has to really, really spike, and then specificity has to stay high throughout the rest of your career. So like Chase was saying with football, like it would be great. The first 3 months of football practice were just really amazing lifting, technical lifting, and everyone got super strong. But if you had your first game at the end of that 3 months, no one would know their positions. They wouldn't know how to play. They wouldn't know the rules of the game, right? So there's that preseason, there's the summer work where everyone can get strong, or the off season where you can get strong, and then specificity ramps back up. And this kind of comes to training versus practice and the 2-factor model. If you want to touch on this, Chase.
Yeah. So this is where people kind of get confused, and you'll see, especially people like in boxing or just in martial arts, or they're punching with like weighted gloves or dumbbells in the head and hands. They're kind of muddling the two together, right? So training is the physiological adaptation that you're trying to attain. If it's boxing, it's, hey, I need to hit the motherfucker harder. So my power production needs to go up, my force production event. That's where, again, the barbells come into play. But then now I take that physiological adaptation that I've obtained from barbells, and I have to practice that. And that's through the use of like skills and the skill set and accuracy and all that stuff with boxing and timing, practicing your punches, practicing your combinations with now this newfound power, because you are going to be a little bit faster now that you're stronger.
For sure. It's training versus practice in the 2-factor model. Mark Repetto, you probably heard of him before. He's the whole starting strength guy. Came out with an article, I'm not sure how many years ago. It's called the 2-factor model for sports performance. We recommend reading it. Hopefully we'll throw a link to the description for that guy. Basically it separates, it kind of elucidates the reason why we think like functional training and sports specific conditioning is kind of a little bit silly, because normally your technical practices for that sport will be able to handle most of the event, most of the time. Right. Who? Yeah, Mr. Dr. Sir Mark Repetto, totally unsure. So like let's say in the boxing example, right? So practice is going to be your bag work, right? It's going to be all of your speed work. It's going to be all of your combinations. It's going to be even live sparring eventually after a certain level of advancement. And then what we would consider to be training would be chasing all of the relevant physiological adaptations. So let's say if you do need to get some more conditioning, if you do need to get stronger for whatever your sport is, all of those things we're going to branch under training. There's a best way to train, and then there's also a best way to practice. Generally, unless you are very lucky with your sport, those things aren't the same. Right. So for me, if I wanted to get really strong for wrestling, doing wrestling would get me to a really good point. I would be able to get here, but it would have a pretty good cap, because it's like, all right, well, I can't slowly make sure all of my training partners gain 2.5 to 5 pounds and we do the same exact movements and the same exact repetitions of movements every week. It's just almost impossible from a convenience standpoint. So we use training as a convenient way to make sure we get all these physiological adaptations, whereas practice is all of the technical work. So in the case of powerlifting, what is that? This is kind of a tricky one for powerlifting, right?
It is, and even weightlifting too. So the training event is you doing, like the volume. You're hitting your heavy sets of 5, your triples. Now the practice, or let's say what's happening on meet day, we are essentially practicing how to do a 1 rep max or a high force reduction event. Now we've kind of touched on it a little bit in training, because again, we do need to get stronger, right, and kind of gain that adaptation. But now, again, we need to practice it, right? We have 3 attempts to kind of essentially practice how strong we are. This is where training kind of gets more specific, again, kind of backtracking to that. And the program starts to change, right? We have to get training accordance to look almost like how we're going to practice. Very similar.
Mr. Dr. Sir, interesting question here. Would heavy singles be practice or training? It really kind of depends on the time of the year. There's a lot of people, including myself, who like to use singles as a weather vane for performance for the day. So work up to a top single and then back off. If that top single was fast as hell and it was heavier than you expected, that's a good indication that your back offs can be really productive and you can kind of use a little more weight on them than you expected. If that let's say light single for you was really heavy and felt like crap, that may be a good indication you're going to be weaker for that day than you expected. So a means of auto-regulation through singles. So it kind of really depends. A practice day, let's say if I have someone doing a meet or a mock meet or whatever it is, like a technical practice day for that, literally may be running through the meet, 3 attempts on all of the lifts, but like significantly lighter than they would otherwise. Listen, I want you to work up to your opener. So the third attempt should feel like your opener for the meet, right? So the third attempt should feel like the first attempt. That would be more like a technical practice day for a powerlifting meet. It is a tricky question because, for you to be really good at singles and for repetitions under 3, you need to train the hell out of those. Technically speaking, it's not very dissimilar from the event itself, and so it is a gray area, and you have to be very legalese to kind of get that done. And in terms of programming considerations, one of the reasons why we need it to be in such a way, we need you to be an intermediate, or we need you to be an advanced athlete, is because of your historical response to training, right? So if we don't know how you respond to training, like let's say if Chase didn't know if he responded better to like triples or sets of 6 or only singles, like let's say 8 singles going into a meet, meet prep would be very difficult. If you're ever preparing for your first meet or your first competitive event, it's not a complete shot in the dark. We're making our best educated guesses off the training data we have. But if I have 108 weeks or times of months of training data, I'm going to be able to make such more accurate calls than if I only have 18 months of training data. So the reason why it's not really good for a novice to decide to compete in something, especially with like a barbell-based sport, so like your 12-month or your 18-month powerlifting meet, is because you're going to be getting stronger almost every week anyways. So I mean, it's fun, but it's not a true competition for you. But whenever you are an advanced athlete and you're on monthly progress, we have really, really good data as to how you're going to respond. So that's that guy. Just to touch on that really quick. And then mental fatigue. Chase, do you run into this with your competitions? Like, how are you feeling yourself? You're coming up into this competition. Are you kind of getting tired of weightlifting? Are you still chasing it with fervent passion?
Yeah, you kind of get a little bit agitated with it, right? Especially if this is kind of like your first prep going into it. You don't really know what to expect, and this kind of goes back to like that historical response. Is that I have, the history of doing several strength lifting meets, so I know that going into this, I'm going to feel beat up. Everything's going to feel like shit. But I'm going to taper off and then kind of have this huge, I kind of don't want to say this, but this essentially an overcompensation of me recovering, right? But that kind of wears on you, right? Because then you kind of think back into your head of like, oh, fuck, am I ruining myself? Am I not going to be strong enough come meet day? Was this prep just all to waste, right? Did this 4 or 6 weeks that I've been training just been flushed down the drain? It's very fatiguing.
Yeah, so a few weeks out, you're not going to feel 100%, and you also shouldn't, and that kind of goes back to historical responses. There are some athletes who they don't really feel that rebound. Like if you do a taper with them, a proper taper, they won't feel that much better. It takes a longer time for them. So for them, they may need to coast on easy training and just get the best day that they can. And for other people like Chase, he just said that his historical response is he'll dig a big hole for himself and then he'll pull out and be really strong. And that's something that, you definitely just learn over time. So that's it for competition. Any other passing thoughts? How are you feeling about your competition coming up? Have you picked your openers yet? How many days out are you? All these questions.
Yeah, so I'll probably train tomorrow, kind of run through something light, and then Friday just get even lighter movements, just so I'm not, spending too long of a time between my last warm up and the workout event or the meet, and I'm not gonna feel alien on the platform, right? So I know that, okay, I've got to get ready for these events. I got to get ready for my clean. I got to get ready for my snatch, and my presses feel fine. I feel fine. I feel like I can open with, an easy 130 on my clean and press. Snatch, on the other hand, I've been kind of messing up the movement pattern there. My rack has been kind of fucked up, but I feel like I should open up with 105 or so. I think I'll be solid there. And then 140 on the clean.
Okay. That's where you're moving to. Cool. Yep. That's awesome. We're very excited to see it. We'll make sure to have a little wrap-up episode just like we did after the 4 or 5 press. That was fun to watch. All right, we're going to dig into form checks here. We have Jay Ware on this one, JWARE 82. He seems to be hitting a 3-plate PR, and he has a shirt on that says 0 days without sarcasm, so things are going pretty well for him. 3 spotters. There it is. There are a lot of people watching. No, that is not sped up. There are a lot of people watching, and there are a lot of cheer. There's a lot of cheering going on. I don't think you guys can hear the sound. But yeah, he buried this thing. He has a crowd of 6 people going on. How do you feel about this heavy single?
It's not bad. I feel like if you got a little bit heavier, you'd have a problem coming up out of the bottom. I like to see a little bit more control, but this still moved pretty damn fast.
Yeah, I would say this is a very conservative opener.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very conservative opener for you. So like I think more appropriate would probably be 340 for a not a risky opener, but a hard opener, and then you could probably do at least 50 for attempt 2, and then you could see how that moved and be risky for number 3. That those weights are in kilograms. Yeah, I really like the single, J-Ware. Congratulations. I'm really happy that you have a lot of people around you who are cheering you on. That's pretty rare nowadays. Yeah, really liked it. This was a very solid single. Chase was right. Leading out of the hole was like a little bit iffy for you, but I think that's a practice thing. Seeing as how fast this single moved and how easy it was for you means you probably don't take singles out that often because this is kind of a big deal. So take more singles out. You'll get more confidence with it. Chase, we got a question.
Yeah. So, Mr. Dr. Sir, does compliance go down for the people you're coaching when you get to the point where you need to dig deep or dig these deep hole to get any stronger? Yes, compliance is definitely utmost extreme, right? Because essentially you've thrown your prep, your goals, all this stuff that you really want to work for hard to some guy who is just telling you, like, I think you need to do this or do that. There's a big trust building scenario that's happening as you go into a meet prep.
Yeah, that's another reason why like having historical responses and a long relationship with your coach is really great, or a long relationship with yourself and you thinking about these things. Because like if you go into a blind and you're like, wow, it feels like I'm getting weaker every week. It feels like I'm getting really beat up. I don't really know what exactly is going on with me physiologically. That can be pretty nerve-wracking for most people going into a competition, So it's one of those things where having a really good rapport and communication with your coach is of utmost importance. Let them know how you're feeling. They should know how you're feeling all the time. And you should really know what the plan is, like having a plan. So ideally, I never see compliance go down whenever people get to these kind of overreached or big fatigue holes, because you should both know it's coming. It's not a surprise. You should have talked about it beforehand. What do you feel about these cleans from the rack with our man Jay Petrie here?
Seeing a little bit of arm pull. I saw one rep that wasn't too bad, but the first few reps, yeah, they're definitely an arm pull. What's this guy's name again?
Jay Petrie. I believe it is James.
James, man, you got to continue up with the jump. I've seen a lot here recently is that people are kind of getting again caught up with the jump and they're kind of doing a slight hesitation with it. Just continue pulling up with your shoulders. Really exaggerate shrugging and getting tall with the jump, and then the rack will happen. Like, this is extremely light to where you're almost half-assing the jump and you're not getting enough out of it.
Yeah, I think this is you need to think about over pulling the bar, over jumping. Just go straight to 135 from here. What do we have? We have a 25, a 5, and a 2.5. Okay, yeah, I think you could probably hit 135 here without too much fuss. Yeah, you may not need to get as kind of like tight in your face with your bracing as you are now. I think that's kind of making you think you have a lot of effort going on. Think more about making the bar move quickly than you getting tight to it. You're already plenty tight to a weight this light. So, but like there is some arm pull, but like the turn and the catch are great. Turn and the catch are great, man. All right, who else do we got? This gentleman, we saw him squat a while ago. He had a good bit of problems. He submitted another video.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, do you remember this rack?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this one. I haven't peeped this yet.
What was his problems that he had last time? It was like
he was too narrow, not at depth. Bar position was high. So he's plenty wide this time. That's good. Cool.
Man, these aren't bad. It's just kind of rushing through them.
Yeah.
Not really resetting, and then still kind of iffy about depth. I think if you slow these down, just keep going down, you're going to come back up, and you'll get depth every time like that.
Yeah, trust your strength on these, man. You want to, again, you're practicing for when the weight gets heavy. So even though you deloaded, you were practicing for whenever it's 265 or whatever you had on there last time. So big breath at the top, pause for a second there. Make sure you are securing depth. Some of these are like right at depth. We want them to be a little bit deeper. You're leading with the chest because of how light these are and kind of the pattern that you've decided to do. So make sure you're practicing your hip drive out of the bottom. But overall, these are fast and significantly deeper than where they were before. So this is definitely solid progress. Any parting shots for our boy here?
No, just what we covered.
Okay. All right. Cool. And that was a Johnny XFI. Johnny XFI. We have a good bit of pulls today. All right. Let's do this one. We got K-Max here, competitor to Kmart. We have a nice thirsty Instagram angle going on here at 4 plates. Right. So he's determining the setup. We'll get there.
Does his stance seem a little bit narrow already?
I think he's overthinking it. It may widen back up right now. We're not really sure. Once the hands get on the bar, I'll be able to, final determination. His shoulders aren't super wide, so for him to have vertical arms, he probably needs to be this relatively narrow.
Damn, man,
as a use for the straps note, you do not need to wrap the entire strap around. If you wrap it once and then squeeze into it, that's fine. 2 times is fine. It doesn't need to be like all 3 or 4. Okay, that was pull number 1. How many do you think we're gonna get here? 5, 3?
Fucking hope so, man. Hopefully these are just stiff like deadlifts. Oh, nice.
Oh, we're slowing down.
Yeah. He's probably done.
We got one more?
Yeah, I feel like he needs to definitely widen the stance. He's not setting the back at all. Get your gaze up like.
Okay, we got 4.5, boys. 4.5.
Yeah, get the gaze up way higher. You're going to be able to set your back. Basically, you need to watch the 5-step setup. You're very adamant about your stance, almost to the point, or really to the point where it's fucking you up.
Okay, so you think wider stance, we got to get the gaze, we got to get the chest up more. I think he may be setting up a little bit too close to the bar, which is why the hips are too high as well.
Yeah.
Because it's just like the first, minute and a half of this video is you just kind of going back and forth about where you want your shins to go. Remember, when you're measuring that distance between your shin and the bar, you do not want to look straight down because you will incline your shins backwards. You will physically lean your hips back to see where your shins are to clear your stomach and all that stuff. Look from the side, like we recommend in the book. I would get a little bit farther away from the bar. Try and make sure that if we were looking at you right from the side, that your knees and your elbows, your knees and your arms would be flush, right? Your knees wouldn't be entirely behind your arms. If it feels like your leg is behind your arm, the hips are generally too high. If it feels like your knee is in front of your arm, the hips are too low. Everything that Chase said, start with a wider stance and then focus on back extension, but you need to facilitate that by getting to the correct distance. But good job, man, getting 405 for 4. That's more than most people will ever pull, but you can definitely hit this for more if you fix your setup.
Was that kilograms or is that actually 45 pounds?
Those are 45-pound plates.
Okay.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, they say 20 on them. Yeah. It would be weird if that was 20 pounds for how slow that moved. All right, we got a clean here from Paul75. Paul submitted a clean a while ago. And it was an interesting one. If I remember correctly, it was kind of like a muscle clean. He didn't really leave the ground. Everything was super narrow, grip, stance, everything. So he seems like he's widened everything out to start right now. Hopefully we'll get some mid-air stuff going on. Yeah, that's a lot better. How'd you feel about rep 1, Chase?
Not bad. He's definitely kind of getting there. Again, I feel like once people are now really adamant about jumping, you'll kind of see Paul here. He's pulling around his knees, right? He still needs to treat this like a deadlift for about the first quarter of it. And then the rest is you just keep pulling fast on it and carry that momentum up and just touch the ceiling with your shoulders. I like that last one probably the best.
I think the last one was the best as well, for sure. We'll start this guy over, see if we can find the difference between 1 and 3. But yeah, you did a really good job of changing this from the muscle clean before. You were now leaving the air, and that's great. Now we just want to think about like getting some hang time with it. Try and like get your head all the way up to the ceiling. Whatever cue you want to use there. Shoulders to the ceiling is a good one too. But basically, we just need you to pull this faster and add some weight to the bar. This is still super light, where you're never going to be able to pull this at like maximum velocity that you can produce because of how light it is. There's kind of a peak to that curve. It's probably another 25, 30 pounds on it for you. But I like these fundamentally. There's pulling around the knees, like Chase was saying, so treat it like a really fast deadlift until it gets to that jumping position. But rep 3 was promising. So I think this just needs practice and weight, Mr. Paul, Paul 75. Any parting shots, Chase?
I don't know about adding more weight. That usually kind of just makes the arm pull worse. But just, again, use all the cues that's on YouTube. Like, Rip really is famous for saying, like, the tricep pose.
Yeah.
Something to do with locking the elbows. And then getting that bar path in a vertical line is going to help a lot of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we will go, let's try, we got Theodore, by the way. We got a Theodore video in here, too. We got some squids from Theodore. Unrack was fine. A little long on the unrack. You do not need to go that far back. Chase, if you had to say these were high or at depth, what would you say?
They're high.
They are high, my man. Very sadly, they are high. I think that's because the stance is too narrow. What do you think, Chase?
I agree. I agree.
Yep. Drive out of the bottom. How do you feel about it?
Everything else seems solid.
Yeah.
It's just you see, like right there, you kind of slow down because you're thinking about depth. If you yourself feel that you're not hitting depth, we definitely know you're not hitting depth, right? And I tell clients this all the time. Like, you need to widen out the stance, shove out the knees, and just don't worry about what's going to happen at the bottom, because it's just an instantaneous thing, because you get the bounce and you're just going to think about hips the whole entire time as you lower yourself.
Yeah, the bounce is an organic byproduct of the correct setup.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you have to like actively concentrate on making some sort of rebound out of the bottom, you're either a super flexible person with a very light weight, or you're probably doing something else wrong. Theodore, you do not need to change much here, my man. You need to widen the stance out. To start, I would say about 2 inches on each side. Shorten your walkout up, and then just sit right in between your heels. You don't need to think about like setting your hips back or anything. I think you'll be totally fine. And then if you think these are at depth, kind of recalibrate your eyeballs as well.
Yep.
Let's see. This is an interesting squat. We'll see what's going on here. This is MAH. I don't think that is a first name, but it is something.
It's like it's cellmate. I don't know.
Yeah, we got a typical northeastern basement here, is what I believe. The tempoist of tempo squats.
Mm-hmm.
Do you run into this a lot, Chase, where people who are new to squatting will impose a really slow tempo for whatever reason?
I've came across it, but not as frequently probably as you.
Mm-hmm.
More so, it's just a bunch of dive bombing into the bottom and then hoping for the best.
Yeah, it's definitely one direction or the other. I think a lot of the tempo one comes from overthinking the squat, because you feel like there's a ton of moving pieces and you have to concentrate on each one individually, or just kind of fright. So if you're dealing with an older person and they're afraid to sit down, especially with a bar on their back, you'll see this tempo, or people who are just really in their head. How would you fix this, Chase?
I'd get his gaze up a little bit more. I forgot this guy's name, but you need to rock back. MAH. So you need to rock back from your heel to your toes, kind of establish that midfoot, get your eyes up, and I'd have you sit back a little bit more. Think about loading your hips as you go down.
Do you think the stance is too narrow at the heels? Do you think the toe angle is a little severe? Because he's kind of playing with it.
Yeah. I'd like to see his toes not move, but his heels kick out just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's the only other thing we missed, is just the toe angle is a little bit too severe. So toe angle being, where your toes are in relationship to your heels. In your case, you can keep your toes where they are, just pull your heels out a little bit. It'll feel more square, but it'll be totally fine. Try and go faster. Get some safeties if you're kind of in your head about falling over with it. But everything Chase said was spot on, in my less than professional opinion. So MAH, speed your shit up, man. Okay, we did him. Andy Maybank coming in hot. This seems like a gym. Does this look high bar to you?
Yeah,
it's hard to
maybe
tell.
We'll see. This is
my man. It's high bar.
Jeez, come on, Andy. You know better than that.
Andy, Mr. Maybank. So with high bar, I think you're focusing on lower back extension a little bit too much. You're like trying to push your butt up and behind you. You're doing this weird sort of like staging with your butt. You don't need to do that. Think less about that. It's going to move a little bit on the descent. That's totally fine. I would pull your heels in and then focus on just ramming your knees forward as aggressively as you can and sitting on top of your heels. Yeah, you seem pretty shaky in here. And whenever I see people, especially like what we just saw there, with a insecure walk, re-rack, if it looks like they're struggling to get it back in or they're in a huge rush to get it back on the rack, normally the upper back position is not tight enough or it's just not really good for them. Like the low bar position, even after a heavy set of 5, I feel like I can hold the thing there for a solid, another 10 seconds because my back musculature is holding it. If you have an insecure high bar, for a lot of people, they report that's just not the most comfortable thing in the world to hold. What would you change here for his high bar?
First, I'd see if he can't even low bar. I think what it is you are a little bit tight in the shoulders. I can probably tell from like the wrist. You see how your hand kind of slipped down. I usually see that a lot with people who have really tight shoulders. See if you can just go a little bit wider. Put yourself in the proper placement. Don't really necessarily worry about where your hands fall. Just get yourself low and then now bunch everything together. Make it really tight and secure, kind of like what Alex was saying. And then, just bring in the grip or the stance rather, and don't hyperextend your back.
So what's weird? The guy to the left is doing reverse Zercher lunges.
Yeah, I saw
he's
that.
holding the bar in the crooks of his biceps and doing reverse lunges with that. Do those instead, man. Never mind the high bar, low bar debate. Go do reverse Zercher lunges. That seems pretty fun. But yeah, Andy Maybank, if you're going to do high bar, you have some adjustments to make. And if you're going to do low bar, we have a lot of resources on that. But just get the bar in the correct position. One of my favorite videos for that, I believe it's called Nailing the Bar Position in the Squat with Phil Meggers. He has a camera right on someone's upper back. He walks you through the entire thing. Really like that one. It's on the Starting Strength YouTube channel. And who have we not done? M. Butner, Paul 75.
We haven't done that guy, so
S. Brandom. Oh, did you? Which one were you going for?
Oh, we'll go after this, I guess.
Very interesting gym color scheme, man. Normally I don't see green anywhere. Oh, we got some Romanians in here.
Do you think those are Romanians, or is
these are 100% Romanians?
I hope so.
Well, I mean, they are. Hopefully, he's trying to do Romanians. Is what we mean.
Yeah,
yeah. He did over 5 reps, so he's hitting a set of Romanians.
Good.
You like Romanians in programming? I really like them too. How do you feel about these?
The form wise, they're a little bit shit. You're kind of getting lackadaisical with setting the back.
A little bit shit.
Yeah, you got to treat this like it's heavy still, right? And the problem that I find too a lot with RDL is that people don't expect their grip to fatigue as easily. It's a little bit different, right? So if you're slipping with your grip, you just need to go ahead and just strap up. But let's say if it's fixed, your grip is fine. You still have to show off the chest, really engage the lats here. I like to use the cue of like you're balancing a cup of water on your back. Try not to let it spill, and then just really bend at the hips. Send your hips back. Let the bar slide straight down.
Yeah, we're trying to train the hamstrings as much as we can here. We're trying to train the glutes to get them to be well trained, right? From regardless of whatever perspective or camp that you come from, we need them to be at tension and need them to put a lot of tension through them. For that, we would like a very anchored spine so that the pelvis has something to pull off of, right? So if your back is rounding through the entire thing, your pelvis is just going to tuck under and the hamstrings won't be receiving as much tension as they will otherwise. What we want is for your butthole to be aimed up and high behind you, squeeze your chest up, make your back nice and archy and really long, and then go from there. I think that belt isn't helping you at all. It's thick on the back, which is kind of useless. If you're going to use that, flip it around so the thick part's on the front, or just take it off completely. You probably don't need a belt for the RDLs, I don't think.
Yep.
Excuse me, but basically our goal here is back extension is priority number 1, and then everything else can follow after that. Chase, how do you like to program these? Do you normally go lighter with shorter reps? What kind of typical sets of rep schemes do you hit for?
Yeah, because the individuals that I have RDL is mainly older folks. I usually do maybe 1 set of 5, 2 sets of 5 if they're kind of a little bit more active. But yeah, it's usually at a lighter intensity.
Yeah, definitely a lighter weight. I normally hammer these things with volume, but start exceedingly light. So even if you're pulling 365, you can start at 135, and if you're doing them correctly, you'll still be able to beat the hell out of your hamstrings. So like what Chase was saying, it's just like with the set counts being really low, they're likely going to be because of how sore these things make you.
Mm-hmm.
They have a very unique ability to just tear your hamstrings up if you're doing them correctly. So you should really be careful about dosing these things, especially for older people, like Chase was saying. But it's good to see some people doing some RDLs, man. I do like that. I do like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We got M. Butner and Manders left here. We'll do Mr. Butner. It seems like he's in like a powerlifting gym.
Yeah, it does.
There's a bunch of guys on the wall.
Yeah, the plates seem all rustic and used, so that's good.
Yes, exactly. Very sure they really do. Theodore has a question in the chat. We'll pop that up and then we'll talk about this deadlift afterwards because this video goes on for a minute. How to fix a good morning squat? Tend to lever too much out of the bottom and end up doing a good morning. We just watched your squats, Theodore. I don't know if I agree with that. You are using a correct amount of hip drive. It is just heavy for you. Wouldn't really worry about pacing your chest and your hips right now. I would say as a priority, it should just be getting to depth, and you'll likely notice a more consistent response. Personally, I always say that if you are pacing hip drive correctly, it should feel like the hips are just initiating it by like an inch, and then everything is following it at the same time.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
For as this guy's deadlift though, it's just the setup, right? You probably had it fine at the start, and then as you get tired, like right there, you're kind of just praying to the gods that you don't die or pass out. Clean it up, right? So try not to rest or lean on the bar. Don't let the thing drift away from you because it's putting more basically work on your back, and it's already failing. Like your back is not even anywhere near to set as you pull, your low back specifically. So right there, like your bar seems about 2 inches in front. I'd roll it up, get your ass up a little bit higher, and then shift back off your toes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have a short torso, my man, and then very long calves. You are an interestingly built fellow. So your deadlift is going to have a pretty horizontal torso no matter what you do to solve that problem mechanically. But Chase is exactly correct. You need to get the bar over your midfoot. The hips need to be higher, and you'll notice the pull be a lot smoother. Anything else you think we're missing here, Chase?
I don't really think so.
Mm-hmm. Interesting question or comment from John Rouser. We'll start with this. A couple of weeks ago, you were watching a bench press set, and the guy failed the 5th rep. That was MJDC. I remember that. You said he should have known he would have failed after the 4th and maybe not have tried the 5th. He goes on to say, but I thought Rip said you should always try the last rep, even if the previous rep felt like garbage. I sometimes stopped after 4 just because it's a pain in the ass to unload and reload the bar if I fail. Am I doing it right or wrong? MJDC has been lifting for a relatively long time. We've been seeing his videos pop through the stream for a while. And then he, as an athlete, should know when he is moving infinitesimally slower. So if you do listen to Rip carefully, he'll always say, Chase, you can feel free to confirm this or call me out for my bullshit. He'll always say, the set will feel terrible, and then he'll watch it, and all the reps will be the same bar speed, right? So his perception of the event is dramatically different than reality. On that one, MJDC knew it was incredibly hard, and his bar speed slowed down so that it was like 2.5 to 3 times as slow as the first one, right? The 5th one was not going to move. There was no way, regardless if his wife and child were hanging off a cliff, that he would have been able to bench that rep. He was just a total muscular failure. That's a maturity thing that you get with athletics. People that Rip are talking to are, someone, let's say, like M. Butner here, who is probably, a month and a half into lifting, and he really doesn't know what 10 out of 10 intensity feels like. He doesn't know what his limit feels like. So he may have felt even in this set that he should have stopped after rep 4, but he remembered Rip saying he should always try 5 reps. How do you feel about that, Chase?
I agree. More so with MJDC, it was a programming thing. He needed to, and I think that's what he even asked was for a programming tweak, was just he needs to now make progress in a different manner. 5s aren't working anymore, so now we have to change it up. That's where maybe that 5th one you should have tried. But again, just kind of like you were saying, if he was a little bit newer, if he was more of a novice, yes, he has to. He has to establish that it's okay to grind. But if he's third year of doing this, there's really no point of him failing a rep when in reality he can just fix that stuff with programming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to interface. You have to interface those things like perception versus reality. Like you got to watch your stuff. You got to know how fast you're moving. You got to know what the movement quality is like. It's paramount that you understand those things. That it's not just how you're feeling. Like Rip will say, how you're feeling doesn't really matter, and that's true. So even if you feel like you should get that 5th rep, it doesn't mean that you deserve to, because you may not be strong enough to from a programming perspective. So all right, we got our man Manders here. What a manly name. Manders. And then I believe he's doing some very light deadlifts. He's not clean in this, I don't believe. Oh, God, it was 1 rep. Let's watch this 1 rep one more time. Man. It seems like this is a 25-pound plate.
Yeah.
You think so, Chase?
This is just the typical squatted up type shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had a video, I want to say it's called Don't Squat Your Deadlift. Yeah. Chase and Alex talking about that a while ago. Check that out. It's on our channel. Go YouTube starting strength 5-step deadlift, or just starting strength deadlift. You'll find it. It's the first thing. There are a million videos for it. It's all very thoroughly explained. But that'll be able to help you out tremendously. The one thing that I would say that's probably not going to be covered in the video is this position that you're doing at the top. You, for some reason, are projecting your head over the bar as a means to finish. You're kind of like pulling it into your waist and then shoving your head forward. It happens. It's not a super typical error pattern, but you're doing it. I'll pause right at the end here so that we can see that. Let's say, yeah, right there. Just think about standing up tall, get your head a little bit more towards the ceiling, stand up with a proud chest, pull the bar a little bit higher so that you can kind of avoid that. And then I think that's just about it for videos for today, right? Yeah, I believe that was everybody.
I believe so.
Yeah, so there's our stuff. And then John Rouser, he said, super helpful answer. Thanks, I'm an intermediate with about 18 months of lifting. If you've been paying attention for the past 18 months, you'll probably have a pretty good eye for like what's possible and what's not. Chase, how long do you think that stuff takes for someone who's paying attention, how long do you think that kind of takes to figure out?
I think it also depends on just maturity too. Like with the kid, I don't care if he fails or not. I want him to, because I want him just to push to the extremes. As you get older, it's kind of a mental game, right? I don't want a bunch of my older people failing, because then they question, what the fuck am I doing here?
Right.
What is the point of paying this kid? He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. So that you kind of have to understand that. But yeah, I think easily 2, maybe 3 years, and you have a really good, adequate feeling of what's accomplishable, what's not.
You should have a good handle on it. It's just like anything else. Like you can go and be tutored to play the piano. If you are not passionate about it and you are not paying attention during those lessons for 3 years, it's still going to be shit. You need to be an active participant in it. And that's one of the things that I really like about, online coaching as a medium, as much as it gets shit on. It helps you collect an absolute ton of data points, So I can say to someone, I can pull up a video of theirs from 3 months ago and say, that was a slow rep, that was a hard rep, all of these things. Whereas in person, you just kind of have to trust your intuition, your spidey senses. And for a lot of people, if you aren't really good at picking those things up, your spidey senses can take 3 years to develop on when a rep's actually hard, whereas for like an online client who I've been working with for like 24 weeks, I'm like, I have 24 weeks worth of lifts, which I can pull out the second you say something is hard. And I'm like, it's not hard.
Yeah.
You'll be okay. Whereas in person, it's kind of countered, because you basically have a team of people around you. I'm sure maybe not the 5:30 in the morning class, Chase, but the after work class, everybody's probably really excited to be there. You're going to have 3 people cheering you on, just like Jay Ware at the top of the stream. That stuff, that carries you through a lot. But make sure you check out your bar speed. Make sure you're being brave. Don't be a P word, like Rip always says. I'll leave that word to him. I won't say it. Chase, parting shots. When can we watch you compete? All that stuff.
I don't know if Nick will have it live stream. He may.
Okay.
But Saturday, Central Standard Time from, I think the meet starts at 10 or 9, and then basically all day until probably about 5 or so.
All right. That's the 24th. What's a typical breakfast for you on the day of? Just a shit ton of coffee? What do you have?
No, just standard stuff. I like to eat like IHOP or so. Just few eggs, hash browns, bacon, normal stuff.
Classic. I was hoping for something oddly specific. You were like, I did it for the first meat. I do it for every meat past that.
Like one raw pumpkin.
Exactly. A whole pumpkin.
Insides.
You eat this. Yeah. It turns out the secret is hard work over a long period of time and not a trick. Man.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Isn't that depressing? But follow our boy Chase, our multiple boys Chase, Chase and Chase 2.0. Find my website, email us videos at support@strength.club. John Rouser, if you want to send in some videos that you're not sure if they're hard or not, this would be a really good opportunity to do that. We'll check it out next week. But that's it for us, and goodbye.